At 11 o'clock, we will be getting the sentencing of Axel Rudakubana at Liverpool Crown Court. That will take some time, maybe some hours. We're going to hear more background about the 18-year-old. We're going to hear more details about the case, stuff that obviously would have come out in the court case had he not pleaded guilty on Monday, on the very first morning of that supposedly 4-week trial. We're also going to hear victim statements from families and much more besides. Before that, I want to talk to Charlie Bentley Astor. She's a writer and author who has been looking very closely at this case since these awful attacks on the 29th of July. And Charlie joins us right now. A very good morning to you.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Thank you so much for joining us. I've been following what you've been writing on social media and your Substack, and it's been very interesting. You're one of the few journalists actually looking into a lot of the background. Now, a lot of stuff couldn't have been written, of course, and couldn't be public until, of course, we had that guilty plea, or in the other case, there had been a trial, a guilty verdict. And a lot has been talked about what the motives are for this man. Under 18 when he committed the crimes, but 18 now. And we've had the Prime Minister talking about, well, you know, it wasn't necessarily terrorism, but we could redefine terrorism. And you know, although we had an Al-Qaeda training manual, he didn't necessarily, sign up to the Al-Qaeda Islamist narrative, and he was obsessed with violence, with genocide. But some of the detail that you've looked at from what has been released from the officials suggests that there was a particular obsession with effectively white genocide here in the UK. Tell us what you found.
Yes, as you say, Julia, there's been a very eclectic set of horrifying sources which he had on multiple electronic devices in his home. And this has led to much confusion as to exactly what his motivations are. And police have yet to declare one. And Rudakubana himself has yet to declare one. However, if you begin to look at the actual names of some of these documents he had in his house, as you say, there's like an almost ethnic cleansing fixation, a genocide fixation towards white Anglo colonialists. So if I read you just a couple of the titles, we have the Mau Mau War, British counterinsurgency in colonial Kenya, the death and survival during the Rwandan genocide, and obviously that's related to Germany's occupation of the region, and examinations of punishments dealt to slaves, rebels in the 18th century British plantation societies. So there is this kind of emphasis on black and quote indigenous people.
Yeah, I mean, bearing in mind, of course, the background that although he was born in Cardiff, as we famously know, he was born to Rwandan migrants who, Rwanda had suffered the most horrific war and horrific genocide.
Yes, exactly. So there's some ambiguity about exactly who his parents are and what their role in Rwanda and the genocide it was or was not.
Some questions about whether or not the father had been involved in one of the fighting forces.
Exactly. So there's some ambiguity about whether they're just straight up victims who try to flee into neighbouring countries and then manage to get asylum into the UK, as some people did, or whether he was in fact taking part on the Tutsi side. And there's some ambiguity about what exactly his role was. Was he just a person on the ground moving stuff around? Mm-hmm. Was he carrying a weapon? Was he leading people? We don't know how close he was to senior officials.
No, indeed. And this is the thing, when we're talking about, this man can't be a terrorist because he doesn't follow a particular ideology. He's not, far right, fascist, Nazi, a white supremacist. He's not an Islamist. But the fact that he had said in school on a number of occasions, apparently he told schoolmates, Britain needs genocide like Rwanda. At a football match at school, he talked about the need for a white genocide in Britain. Now, these may have been among a number of different remarks that he'd made. We know that his obsession with violence, beheadings, horrific scenes and genocide had been long known to the authorities, referred to Prevent again and again, stuff he'd said to school, his parents and others. But as you say, there does appear to be a bit more of a theme than perhaps the officials have suggested to us. And given their unwillingness to give us information, even about things found in his home, quite in contrast to the amount of information given to us about other suspected killers at the time. Thomas Mayer, in the case of Jo Cox, 2 days after her horrific murder, we knew everything that was in his home. Oh, we knew about all the books he'd ordered, that he was, he was far right, that he, that he was obsessed with Nazi memorabilia. We knew all that. That apparently wouldn't prejudice his trial, and it didn't. He was convicted a few months later. But apparently us even knowing about the Al-Qaeda manual, the ricin, apparently that would have prejudiced this man's trial, which I think a lot of people find quite perplexing.
Yeah, it's not right. If you look at, it kind of doesn't matter what the political motivation for a terror attack has been. Obviously, the majority of terror attacks in this country are Islamic in motivation. But even when we've seen sort of quote far-right neo-Nazi inspired attacks, again, they've been declared within almost like the same day, and if not the same day, at least like a couple days later.
Sometimes within hours.
Hours. Well, and this is the thing. Keir Starmer was not concerned when he took to a national stage and said that all of these rioters were far right, and that they were members of the EDL. You could say that that was certainly prejudicing proceedings by declaring their guilt before they had come before a court. So there's a kind of hypocrisy there in Starmer's attitude.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, you could argue that the stakes are higher in this case, but anyone who's going to lose a family member by going into prison for an extended amount of time, and someone who's going to have their life potentially ruined by that experience, it matters. And yes, as you say, there's some confusion as to why this hasn't come out, at least some details sooner.
Oh, exactly. And it does strike me that if we did have, and let's bring it down to basics, because we know what we're talking about and we don't pussyfoot around these things here at Talk. Yes. If this was a white man who had been accused and is now obviously pleaded guilty to these killings, and it had been black or Asian children who had been stabbed, who'd been targeted in a class and been stabbed, I think that we would already have known, and I think it would have been made clear, I think within days of that crime being committed in Southport, that this man had an obsession with genocide of black children or Asian children or anti-Muslim sentiment or whatever it was. I think we would have been told about that. I think they'd have been happy to push that, and that would have been all over the news, and no one would have worried about that affecting any fairness of any future trial. I think the rules are different when the concern is the other way around. Do you think that is possibly the case?
Do you know what, this is the feeling of some of the family members. They've said to me, expressly, like, we feel like if this had been a white supremacist attack against, Muslim children or a group of black children, that this would have been over pretty much within a few weeks. And we would have heard every sordid detail that there would to be known about this. So as with the grooming gangs, there is this kind of suspicious air to it. Are you keeping stuff back simply because this individual is black and comes from an immigrant background? We know that a Danish study shows that second-generation immigrants are almost more prone to crime than their parents who arrive here because of identity-related issues.
And we've seen that with me.
You're not allowed to say this.
Yeah, but we've seen that with things like Shamima Begum and people like that. People, born and bred here, why on earth, but feeling that this Britain isn't their home. When you say you've spoken to family members, is that members of the family? We can hope we can hear, we think, some of the victim impact statements from the family members. And of course, the three little girls, Bebe King, Elsie Dot Stancombe and Alice de Silva Aguiar, we know their names, the 6-year-old, 7-year-old, 9-year-old who were killed. The other 8 children, we don't know their names. They're being protected. Their family members obviously can't be identified. Have you spoken to those who lost their children and those who have had children who were brutally injured? And tell us a bit more detail what they've been saying to you.
So I've not spoken to any of the families who have directly lost a child. The way that, so I'm not seeking these families out, I'm simply speaking on social media and they're coming to me. And so as you can imagine, the families who have lost their children are so overwhelmed that they obviously couldn't be trolling through social media. But the parents who have children who survived, who have been maimed badly by this killer, are angry. They're expressing, they expressed concerns about the fact that they weren't there when Rudakubana changed his plea. They were taken. This was a very sort of shocking change. Even the solicitors around the family weren't expecting this. They did not have time to get to the court that morning to hear this, and that might have been their only opportunity to hear this monster speak.
Yeah,
it's just that.
Do any of those loved ones of the children, as you say? I mean, I think often they always talk about the 3 children who died, which is just unbelievably appalling. But there were 8 children living with this for the rest of their lives and their families. Did those families who did get in touch with you, did they say suggest that they think that, and as you mentioned, this would have been very different if it had been the other way round, for want of a better phrase? Did they feel that there has been a cover-up? Do they feel that they're not getting the full story still?
That's why they've reached out to me, because they feel like they're being lied to. Obviously, they've been given some information by the police just before they were supposed to go to this first day of the trial. They watched some of the body cam footage of police arriving on the scene. They wouldn't have been shown that if the trial wasn't going ahead. So this was a very snap decision. But because this is not all going to be aired in trial, there's actually going to be quite a lot that they're not going to get to hear. So I'm going to be working with them and others in the local community to try and get at these details so that they can learn as much as they want to learn. Absolutely.
Well, look, I really appreciate you joining us. I know you want to go and watch the sentencing. Charlie Bentley Astor, who's a journalist and author, you've done some fantastic work on this. Really appreciate you joining us, and I hope we'll come on the show again. Thank you for that.